and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Alexandra Gouta. I'm a journalist, and I welcome you all to this discussion about the now and next in artificial intelligence and analytics. ChatGPT brought forth the issue of the exponential growth of artificial intelligence, reminding us that artificial intelligence comes with great opportunities, but also great challenges and risks. According to a recent survey of AI researchers, a significant percentage of them believe that there is 10% or even greater chance that AI may cause an existential catastrophe for the human species due to our inability to control it. Costi. The discussion about artificial general intelligence is also more vivid than ever, with scientists talking about a form of artificial intelligence that is able to deliver solutions far beyond human reach, while at the same time having the ability to rewrite its own code to get faster and smarter. Of course, we don't need to be afraid of artificial intelligence, since the opportunities are great, also for businesses, and the future is still in our hands. So all these issues we will be discussing with Costi Perricos over the next 20 minutes. Dr. Costi Perricos is Deloitte's global artificial intelligence and data leader. Costi has a long history in the field of artificial intelligence, but more recently, generative artificial intelligence, what we are all talking about, ChatGPT, etc. Costi. He advises clients on AI-enabled business transformation, while in the past he has delivered several large projects, technology-driven programs, concerning both the public and the private sector. So, Costi, welcome.
Thank you. Very delighted to be here.
Thank you for making the time to be with us today. Recently, an open letter was signed by almost 2,000 people. If I'm not wrong, the number is almost 2,000 right now.
It is, yeah.
Between them, MIT physicist Max Tegmark, computer scientist Stuart Russell, and Elon Musk. This letter was actually an open call on all AI labs to immediately stop for at least 6 months the training of artificial intelligence systems that are more powerful than GPT-4. So my first question is this call indeed justified? And could governments and companies ever be persuaded to stop the development of even stronger AI?
So look, it's actually a very difficult question to answer in a yes or no answer, because we humans are very bad at predicting exponential growth. We always think linearly, and any predictions we've ever made about something that's exponential, we got it wrong. I mean, Bill Gates famously said that 640 kilobytes of memory would be big enough for anyone to use a computer, right? So, for me, I think if we look at the letter, there are some questions about it. I mean, there's some controversy about it, as you probably know. Not everybody who said signed it actually signed it. There were no controls. Some of the quotes in there were misquoted, but actually it is quite vague in terms of what it means. And I know the people that signed it are very smart. But when you say something like, stop the development of anything more powerful than GPT-4, what does that mean? Does it mean more nodes? Does it mean more computing power? And the reason why I make that point is that we have lots of companies that talk to us, particularly over the last 3 months. The two things they focus on mainly is, one, making them more efficient. So you're now getting the same efficiency that GPT-4 has with significantly less amount of nodes, which would still be permitted under that. And actually addressing a lot of the challenges that the letter stipulates. They're all worried about explainability, about ethics, around getting enough diversity in the data so that the information you get doesn't repeat the mistakes we've made in the past with AI, where algorithms have been racist or sexist and things like that. So, for me, I think the positive impact of that letter has been that it's awoken everybody to the issues and the dangers, and so everybody's talking about it. To your question about whether governments should intervene, I don't think governments have the right speed of execution yet to be able to deal with these things. I mean, I do about 3 of these talks a week at the moment, and every week I'm saying something slightly different because things are progressing so fast. So, I think government should do twofold. I think they should work quite closely with industry and understand how these developments are, understand actually how the current regulation is helpful. GDPR is a very helpful tool in addressing some of the issues that are there. But I think also more importantly, the government should really start considering some of the strategic impacts. So, for example, one of the areas that's going to be affected by this is, of course, the call center industry, right? I think within the next 4 or 5 years, you'll be calling a call center and you won't quite know whether that person is human or not. There are areas around the world, there's some in the north of England, where a vast majority of the population works in call centers. What do you do as a government when in 4 or 5 years, 170,000 people, as is some of the predictions in some places in England, are going to lose their jobs? Those are the things that I think the government should be focusing on.
Mm-hmm. It's a difficult puzzle, Costi. But what governments maybe could do is set some basic principles on artificial general intelligence, the advanced form of intelligence that seems very possible we will see in some years from now. According to some researchers, it may be as soon as 8 to 10 years from now. Nobody knows exactly when that happened. But should the government set some basic rules around artificial general intelligence? And I would like to add something on that. How can we put China and US or China and Russia in the same boat in this? How can they cooperate?
So I think you raise an interesting point, and it's a good point, right? Government should focus where the ball is going, not where the ball is now. And I would use a parallel to human cloning. Governments talked about regulation and outlawed human cloning long before it was people cloned humans. And to your point about China and Russia and the West and East sort of collaborating, they're all very strict about this. In fact, I think the only people who are in jail for human cloning are in China at the moment. So I do think that government has a duty to look ahead and think about general artificial intelligence and put now legislation in place about what will be accepted or not. I think the one thing I would say, if I may, and you'll always get different opinions, so mine is not decisive in any way. We have had these calls throughout AI history. When Deep Blue beat Kasparov in chess, the world said, okay, this is it. Machines are going to take over. 15, 20 years later, I think it was when Watson, IBM's Watson, beat the Jeopardy game, everybody was like, okay, now it's like human beings. I think this is just another evolution. And I don't think that this is necessarily indicative that general artificial intelligence is very close. Mm-hmm. Because all these algorithms are doing they're predicting the next word. And they're doing so in a way that feels like humans, but it's not.
Of course it's not, but some talk about sparks of artificial general intelligence in the GPT-4, right? I don't know if you agree with that we can see sparks.
So I've played a lot with a lot of these large language models, and I would compare them to my teenage children. They are 100% confident in what they say, but only 70% correct. And some of the mistakes that they make are definitely not human intelligence. So I'm perhaps in 4 or 5 years we will see sparks, but I don't think we're going to see I don't think we're going to see the humanity in those responses that people expect.
Okay. Today's AI race seems to be much more than just adopting AI. And as you mentioned earlier, you have contacts with businesses. You talk all the time about these matters. Would you say that businesses are doing a good job in this level? What can they do to actually harness the power of AI? What are the outcomes so far? Because I believe you had some reports about the outcomes of AI, if I'm not mistaken. And what role could and does leadership play?
So look, I don't think our email box and phone lines have been so busy as they have done since the announcements by OpenAI and ChatGPT. I think businesses are responding very, very quickly. I think, many businesses, particularly knowledge businesses, lawyers, accountancy, professional services firms like ours, tax consultants, etc., are all going to face quite a significant sort of threat and opportunity. And so I think there is huge amounts of interest on that. I mean, if I talk to you about some of the areas that we see are big fields of play, one, of course, is the whole area around content generation, okay, whether it's Actually, we're seeing journalists being used that in order to be able to harness huge amounts of data and then be able to summarize it so that they can, be much more effective. Whether it's creating ads, whether it's connecting with your customers in a much more personal way, whether it's creating new worlds. So we are seeing a lot of interest from metaverse firms around how you create these new worlds using generative AI. Because we should mention that this is not just about generating text. These algorithms can generate video, they can generate pictures, they can generate code. I think what is really interesting in all the thing about content generation is that ethics and bias and kind of impact on society is at the front of the conversation. Mm-hmm. If I use an example of previous journeys with AI, it took about 2 or 3 years for industry and government and people to really recognize that they were really ethical concerns. It was once we heard the stories of, algorithms for screening CVs that were biased against women, algorithms that were dealing with the judiciary that were racist, all those sort of things that people started saying, hang on, there's a problem here. This is now, 3 months in, at the forefront of the conversation. So that's really good. The other area where I think it's going to be huge for businesses is the whole area of code generation. I don't think people realize that necessarily, but these algorithms are really, really good at understanding code. To the point that I think in 4 or 5 years' time, we're going to be looking at modern programming languages like Python in the ways that, I used to look at assembler and machine code, if anybody remembers what these were. And what we're seeing is they can generate code. What we're also seeing is they can translate code. So many organizations that have these huge code bases, perhaps in languages like COBOL, that run critical applications, but nobody understands what they do, you can now translate them into another language. They're also great at documenting code. So often there's code lying around an organization where nobody actually knows what it does. They're very good at documenting that. And we are actually doing quite a few projects in that regard. So I think that's probably, from my perspective, one of the untapped areas that is going to be very big. Mm-hmm. And then the third area, if I may, I think it might be the most exciting actually, which is, these technologies are being used to progress nuclear fusion, to progress solving climate change, to progress drug discovery. Very specialist areas, but I think that's going to have the biggest impact on humanity.
A very important impact. We are in the middle of an energy crisis.
Absolutely.
In that, nuclear fusion could play a transformative role. So what about the public sector? What would you say are the 3 major trends, or maybe there are less or more, I don't know, that will be hitting the public sector?
So that's very interesting. I mean, I think a lot of these trends actually started after the pandemic. I think they've accelerated through this, but they started after the pandemic. So if I may, I think the first trend is there's a very big change in expectation from the public of what they expect from the public sector. They saw how governments reacted in the pandemic, how they started using data, how apps were created to help people get vaccinated or track people in very, very quick succession because the need was there. And what I'm seeing with my clients, because I'm a public sector partner, is that, the public now expects when they call a call center in the public sector for it to be streamlined. They expect much more than they did in the past. I think the other trend is I think governments are also responding. One of the really big challenges that has always been a problem in AI is data. We saw very early on in the development of AI algorithms that companies would have this little trial, this proof of concept, and it would be brilliant, but it was done on perfect data created specifically for that, and then they deploy it to the rest of the organization, and it wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. And people realize that, as I say, if you've got good data, you get artificial intelligence. If you get bad data, you get artificial incompetence, and that has never been truer for these large language model algorithms. Mm-hmm. If you feed the likes of ChatGPT with bad data, you're going to get nonsense out. And what governments have realized that, and I'm seeing huge amounts of efforts now being put into cleaning up government data, making sure you're collaborating a lot better across departments, governments becoming very strategic about that. I mean, our own department here in Greece, the Department for Digital Governance. You know, a lot of the things that they're focusing on, if you look at all their skill sets, many of them are around AI, and they're embedding them in their strategies, which I think is brilliant. The third, if I could add a third one, is the dire need for change. You know, Europe and the world is entering kind of recessionary headwinds. People want smaller governments. There's less taxes going around. There's less funding going around. So we're seeing a real kind of appetite to transform services, be that in sort of interacting with the public, detecting fraud, helping people get back to work, streamlining benefits. All these areas are ripe for AI transformation.
Of course, and we only got 4 minutes, but I wanted to ask you something before going to my last question. Very soon these models, not very soon, they already do that. They will generate their own data. This is something that troubles me because this data is not always accurate. Do we have things to fear?
Well, I think to me that's why, you know, in the same way you wouldn't necessarily let your 16-year-old child loose on the economy, right? We wouldn't let those algorithms loose without a human in the loop. You know, as you know, because I know we spoke about that, we believe that this is the age of with. This is the age where humans work with machines. And this has never been truer. You know, you need a human to look at these algorithms, to understand what they're doing, and a lot of effort's being put into that technology-wise, and to make sure that what they're saying is correct. Mm-hmm. You know, I actually think the creation of artificial data is really, really important. And it's really important because a lot of the data we now have is pre-pandemic, which in many cases is of no use whatsoever, because we've had a complete shift in how society operates, right? And so the way we buy things now are different to the way we bought things 15, 20 years ago. So we need to generate this synthetic data. But I think you're always going to need humans overseeing it to make sure that, you know, it's not incorrect.
Wow, that's encouraging. And this brings me to my last question about skills. We'll certainly need humans. I believe that, or I want to believe that. I don't know what will happen after all. But I believe that when we're talking about skills around AI or data or analytics, though technical knowledge is very important, it's not everything. Other things are needed also. So my question is, what skills are and probably will be in the future important in this field? And also, what is the role of the so-called purple teams?
The purple teams. So look, I think again, there are many lessons to be learned from our history in AI, because, you know, AI has been around for a very long time, and it's been in the corporate.
1956, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I mean, you know, if I could digress very briefly, I did my PhD 30 years ago, and I thought that this is going to change the world. I didn't think it was going to take 25 years for people to be interested in it, though. So you know, I think you will need the technical skills. You will need people who can translate the technical skills to the business, what we call the purple people, who fit with the blue side and the red side of the brain. But most important, whatever change you want to drive, you need to drive change in the people themselves. Right? There's no point having an algorithm without thinking about the business model that goes around it, without thinking about the human skills that go around it. Yeah, if you enable your salespeople, unless you change your entire sales processes, the algorithm might only get a 5% gain. If you think about your whole business model, you might get an 80% gain. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. So skills like change management, like the ability to translate technical facts in a way that people understand. Leadership is very, very important. You know, to be able to show the way to a new horizon in an organization without putting fear in people. But also, most importantly, we need to think about how we train our people and how they learn. You know, many of the people in this room, I'm sure, when they started out in their career, did what ChatGPT does, right? They amassed loads of information and created reports that their supervisors then looked at and corrected, and then you learn from that correction. If machines start doing all that, how do we learn when we learn a new craft? So it's things like that I think are going to be really important.
Okay, so Costi, thank you very much. We're exactly in time. Actually, we've got 17 seconds left. So Max Tegmark has a very interesting book. It's called Life 3.0, where he says that a super intelligent AI will be able to accomplish its goals extremely good. So we shall make sure that these goals are aligned with ours. So let's just don't mess this up, okay?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks.